I see everybody on here, making sure that all of our speakers are here with us this morning. We're so thankful to have all of you on this call. Myself and my partner Nyusha, we are the co-founders of Global Black Youth. I will turn it over to my co-founder to introduce herself, to introduce Global Black Youth and the work that we do, and give you a bit of background on this webinar. And then finally, we'll turn it over to our colleagues and our panel members today who are going to be speaking to you about technology, about tackling misinformation, and the state of play of digital rights on the African continent and across the diaspora. So Nyusha, please take it away.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. Just before I start, just make sure that you're muted because there's an echo in the background and that we can hear popular speakers. As Nyeliti said, I'm the co-founder of Global Black Youth together with Nyeliti Hawana, who you'll hear more throughout the call today. Global Black Youth, as many of you know, convenes the world's most disruptive, innovative, and entrepreneurial young Black leaders, and supports them in generating knowledge and solutions that transforms their ability to impact the world. We do this especially through in the fields of technology, innovation, entrepreneurship. We have 4 pillars that we base our work on. One is to launch a discourse on racism and structural violence faced by young people of African descent globally. 2 is to reposition young Black people as an untapped knowledge, resource of knowledge and solutions, and connect young Black leaders to each other and to the various sectors of society. And finally, to establish a pipeline between talent and opportunities. We are curating these 3 conversations on technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, to highlight the important work that young Black leaders are doing globally, that in the face of the pandemic, and also to change, because one of our operational theories is to depart from a deficiency approach to an asset-based approach. So we would like to see young people of African descent portrayed, especially in the media, not in a condescending way, but as valuable sources of knowledge. So in this, I will not take more of your time, and I'll let Nyeliti take it from here. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Nyusha. So as Nyusha mentioned, Global Black Youth is really working to create this global community of young Black leaders, innovators, disruptors. And so throughout this meeting and our subsequent webinars, you'll be hearing not only from young people on the continent, but young people within the diaspora as well. So before I turn it over to our esteemed colleagues, a couple of housekeeping rules. Firstly, as I mentioned, and as most of you have done, I ask that you please switch off your video and keep yourselves muted. Our panel today will be organized in 3 main sections. We'll begin with a back and forth between our panel members and our moderator. During this panel, I know as we're so many on the call, there'll be a lot of questions, a lot of comments, and we invite you to put your questions and comments in the chat box that you'll see by clicking at the bottom of your screen. What we'll be doing throughout the panel is collating and collecting those questions to organize them and then present them to Shona. And that way Shona can then kind of take some thoughts from the crowd and allow a first round of question and answer that the panel members can speak to. Following that, we will then open it up, and I invite you to then use the hand raising function, and we'll be able to call on people to give further comments, further questions, or any other food for thought. We invite you in the chat to please put any resources, information, anything in keeping with the content and the conversation that you'll be taking part in. Just so you know, this video is being recorded. It will be available on our website and on our partner's website, the Port Tolans Institute, once the panel has concluded. So with that, I would like to thank you all for joining us. I would like to thank our partners in this, and I would like to turn it over to Shona Olalere, who will be moderating the panel, introducing herself and the panel members.
Okay, thank you so much, Nyeliti, for that awesome work. We're so excited to be here. I'm sure everyone can hear me. We're really excited to be part of this first webinar series from the Global Black. And today we're talking about something very important, which is tackling misinformation. And then we have like three very amazing set of people joining me, in this discussion. First, we have Nelson in Kenya, who works as a director of program for DefyHateNow. They're doing an amazing work across 5 different countries. Hi, Nelson. Thank you so much for joining. We also have Rogério, the journalist, a politician, an ambassador of Pan-African Council in Brazil. Thank you so much for joining, Rogério. And then we have Hlengiwe. Hlengiwe is the Expression, Information, and Digital Rights Project Manager at the Center for Human Rights in the University of Pretoria. So we're having these 3 people, Nelson, Rogério, Hlengiwe, join us in this discussion. So I just want us to delve right into the discussion without spending much time. We have the coronavirus pandemic ongoing, but still we have in as much as we're trying to deal with coronavirus, right? We have a lot of information. I mean, personally, I'm sometimes I don't even want to go on the internet because there's so much of things going on there. What is true, what is not true. So it's sort of, we are facing this pandemic, and then at the same time we have this infodemic. So I want to know from you, I want to say, Nelson, what is the state of digital rights in your country? I understand that about 48 million, we have about 48 million internet users in Kenya. So I'm wondering, what is the state of digital rights in Kenya? Nelson?
Okay, thank you so much, Shona, for the question and also the elaborate introduction. So when we talk about the state of digital rights in Kenya, I work between Kenya, South Sudan, and Cameroon. So let me just speak in the case of Kenya. Kenya incredibly has one of the highest internet penetrations in the region, and also has a lot of access to services. Like right now, as we're talking, there are more than 5 submarine cables of internet. So the connectivity level is very, very high, especially in the city centers. That being said, there is a lot of issues and disparities that have been addressed, majorly to do with rural and urban connections. So you find that in the urban centers, we have a lot of connections. Okay. So you find that in the urban centers, we have a lot of connections, but then once you go into rural Kenya, you find that access to internet becomes really, really low. These are one of the issues that are being faced here. The other issues that we have, and we used to kind of struggle with, and we still address, is issues to do with data privacy and data security. So in Kenya, this has been a very major issue. But until earlier last year, late last year, Kenya actually signed a data protection law, which guarantees data protection to all citizens. But the enrollment and the application of that is not yet to come. The third issue that is still facing issues with digital rights in Kenya is the issue of guaranteeing people's rights while they're online. So this includes harassment, bullying, hate speech, and incitement to violence, and also misinformation. It's still, as much as people access internet, their safety and also their mental or even times even physical safety is not guaranteed, and that can really lead into a lot of issues. And of recent, Kenya signed a bill that's called the social media law, something. I'll put the link to it later here. And that bill has been used by the government to arrest several people over the last, 3 or so people notably, but several people because they posted information online. And there is a likelihood. The activists and the data protection community was really protesting this bill, but then it was passed. And then there is a likelihood of that also being misused to crush dissent or even go after people who post and share content online. I think I'll stop here. I will add other content. I will speak more whenever any of these themes are highlighted in the subsequent discussion.
Oh, okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Nelson, for that. And then, yeah, like that's really true, because like I was checking and then I found that like over 87.2% of Kenya's population actually has access to internet. Like that's quite phenomenal. And then just knowing that there are issues with data privacy and like working to fix it is also like very good, knowing that this much people in the population actually have access to internet. So thank you so much, Nelson, for that. So Hlengiwe, yeah, can you like sort of tell me more about what the digital right is like in your country? I understand that for South Africa, about 32 million, which is about 55% of its population, actually have access to internet. So I'm wondering if like majority of the population have access to internet, what is digital right like in your country? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and hello everyone. Shona, allow me to not only talk about South Africa. Our work as the Center for Human Rights goes beyond South Africa. So I would like to make reference to other countries as well, but not extensively. So first of all, before I get to the specifics, I would like to point out that we are having this conversation at a time when the African Commission on Human and People's Rights has recently adopted what I think is a landmark instrument when we are looking at the issue of digital rights on the African continent, is the Declaration of Principles of Freedom of Expression and Access to Information. What is groundbreaking, or what is different about that instrument is that it now incorporates an element of freedom of expression and access to information online. And this is a welcome development on the African continent. It puts us a step forward as far as advancing digital rights, and also it provides guidance as far as the normative framework is concerned on digital rights on the continent. But in terms of where we are right now, if we're looking at a country like South Africa, for example, we have about 50% at least of the population that can be said to be connected to internet. And when we're looking at other countries, comparatively, when we're looking at other countries on the continent, we are seeing that connectivity is very low. I would give an extreme example, which is Eritrea. As of 2017, the internet penetration rate was around 1.7%. And I doubt if things have changed. If they haven't changed significantly. So we are at different levels. So we have a large segment of the African population that is not yet connected to internet. And when we are faced with this global pandemic, COVID-19, we are now talking about the new normal. And if you have such a large segment of the population in Africa not connected to internet, this whole thing called new normal doesn't make sense to other people because they are not connected to internet. We are talking about online schooling. What is online schooling without internet? We are talking about communities that are excluded, like rural areas. There is most of the rural areas, you find some of them have access to internet, they have not access to mobile connectivity. And we have a lot of rural areas in Africa that are not connected. Even mobile connection itself is a problem. We're not even talking about this fast internet that we are using. So this conversation that we are having today, there is a large population that is not able to take part, not by choice, but because they don't have the internet. Even if it's going to be recorded and made available on different platforms, they will still not be able to access it because of lack of access. So the other burden that people face is that even if internet is available, you might be connected, but there is the burden of the data cost. The cost of data in most cases is very high. I was looking at the cost of internet in Zimbabwe. Now they are running a campaign of data must fall because the exorbitant costs. If people have to access information online, it's gonna be very difficult if the cost of data is that high. The other thing, challenge that we are facing in Africa generally, the supportive infrastructure. If we have infrastructure but we do not have adequate electricity, we are always having electricity being cut. So even if you have access to internet, when you don't have electricity, which is a supporting infrastructure, that also compromises your ability to connect to internet and use the digital devices that we are able to use these days. Also, the other thing, the issue of persons with disabilities is another very important issue that we need to point out when you talk about digital rights in Africa, because the computer that I use is not likely to be the computer that a person with a visual impairment would use. So there is that element of the cost of assistive devices which persons with disabilities need, and that the cost is very exorbitant. At some point, I attended a workshop and sat next to a person who had a visual impairment, and they said the cost of their device that they were using was around 55,000 rands. An ordinary person cannot afford that. And we are in a global pandemic where we need access to credible information more than ever. So if they don't have such devices to use that are affordable, it becomes a barrier. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hlengiwe. That was very, very insightful. I love how you were able to bring out various strands to the discussion. So most of the time when we talk about, digital rights, we often, stop at, people that don't have access to internet at all. But looking at the other groups of people that were able to pull out, for example, the people with disabilities, and then at the same time, access as per the cost of data. So for example, in Nigeria, we have like the government distributing palliatives, around. We have like the food companies giving out food. And then like professionals like me are like, we don't necessarily want food, right? We want you to sort of reduce the amount of money that we spend on data, because it costs so much, especially now that people are working from home. So thank you so much. That was really, really insightful. So I'll just jump in. Rogério, what's the state like in Brazil? I understand that about 70% of its population actually have access to internet. So what is digital right like in Brazil? Rogério, can you unmute yourself? You're still muted.
Oh, I not mute myself. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, at first I would like to thank you, the Global Black Youth, for the invitation to be in this debate with you. In Brazil, yeah, you're right. More than 74% of the population got access to internet. The largest part is from mobile internet. And Brazil is like a continent in terms of territory, and we have to be able to analyze the different parts of Brazil, because when you take the information, the rates about the internet access is like we handle with different countries inside the same country, if you go to southwest of Brazil, yeah, the great part of people got internet access for mobile, and the problem that our colleague from South Africa said of the price of the package of data. Yeah, is an issue in Brazil, of course, because the companies that provide internet data create the layers of data package that limitate the internet for the poor people and the middle class people. No, and when you're talking about to get information, for example, the great part of the package of data is to use WhatsApp or messenger apps or social media. You are not allowed to go to the Google Chrome or Internet Explorer to go to a newspaper website, for example. So people is not allowed to research for the news out of this information bubble, the bubble of the messengers and the bubble of the social media. That's the point in Brazil, and is easy to manipulate the information in messenger apps and social media, because you do not tools to make a fact checking, for example, to be sure if this information is true or false. No, that's the point in Brazil, because the people, even in the hood, in favelas in Brazil, get internet access, no, from mobile, but do not access to tools to handle with the information. You know, that's the point in Brazil. It's easy to manipulate the information because the people do not have how to access tools to make a fact checking. I guess that's the point, the main point when you try to analyze the fake news environment in Brazil.
Oh, great. Rogério, just to clarify that I got you correctly, you're saying that in Brazil, like you can have access to social media, like internet social media, without having access to other, like mobile internet?
Let me be clear. The companies in Brazil that provide internet data package, they limited to turn this cheaper. The access to internet, to social media and messenger apps like WhatsApp, Telegram, and all these kinds of messengers. So this creates an information bubble because people don't be able to access other resource of information. You can take your cell phone and try to access a website because it's not allowed by this package. No, that's my point.
Oh, wow. So it's sort of like a means to cut down the price of data for some people who can't afford the full package. And then I can just imagine being in their case. So like an average person would probably want to be like, use the social media bundles than buying like the full package, because with the social media you can connect with friends and that oh my god.
When you take the social rates, you're gonna see the largest part of people that get this kind of package are poor, are black. No, that's the point.
Yeah, and I think no wonder, so sorry, right? I think like I'm seeing like people commenting that this is very interesting, like the case in Brazil, because I saw how that the WhatsApp users on WhatsApp are a lot higher than any other social media platform. Like so WhatsApp, Facebook, and like Twitter, and then Instagram, they have like quite a lot. So now I can understand why that is the case. Oh, great. Okay, thank you so much for that. Well, it's really like a great learning experience. Okay, so Nelson, I'm back to you. I want to get your perspective. How do you think misinformation, or I don't know, like let me just even be more objective with my question. Do you think misinformation hurts the Black community? Like, and if you feel so, why do you feel that way? And have you had like scenarios? How does misinformation affect the Black communities?
Thank you for that question. So I think I would like to kind of tackle this from a larger perspective and from a larger point of view. When you look at the, here in where I work, in countries where I work, is it's in Cameroon, in Ethiopia, South Sudan, and the rest. You find that this manifestation of access to technology and how information is being shared, it's usually not culturally representative of the people, and people don't have, like for example, places where I work in, you find that a lot of the time people don't have content in their native language. And that just restricts a lot of things that someone can do. So to start with already the scales of who can write content and who can drive the agenda is already tilted towards a different side. So you find that just by the nature of how the internet was built and how the protocols and who have access to it, you find that people from the West have access to creating more content and have access to more sources of information. When you come to the issues of misinformation in the countries where I work in, I find that misinformation impact the Black community, especially like, for example, in Kenya or in South Sudan or in these other countries. It's usually the lines of impact and access. Usually also it's a function of resources. And you find that the structural issues that deprive people from the resources and deprive people from access to literacy and access to all these things, misinformation is appended at the end of this series of issues that have already been established historically. So you find, for example, in Cameroon, that's a country where we have an active program in, you find that there is a majority of an English-speaking population that at times don't get content in their language. Most of the content is shared in French, and that limits access to information. So that means you're cut out, and as such, the likelihood of you accessing accurate information is less, and you're more likely to hear rumors and hear stuff like that. There is also another issue of media ownership and content creation. So you find that, and also this happens in many African countries, you find that the ownership of the media is usually centered between few people, and most of the time also it's media and ownership and media and agenda and content is being created by international actors that do not either represent you culturally, and even the content that don't represent the issues that you're tackling with. What happened is that you find that the media houses that are in the Black community are underfunded, and as such, they cannot do thorough work to really produce content that can meet the quality and the standards of the international actors that are in play. Lastly, just misinformation on COVID-19. Right now, what we are seeing is that especially in communities here in Kenya or also in South Sudan, people are really locked down and the mistrust is so high. As such, you find that like in South Sudan, for example, we woke up, we're doing work there. We were working, and then the following morning, we had a news that spread throughout the country that if someone takes tea without sugar, they become immune to COVID-19. That information started online, but by 6 a.m. in the morning, or even the elderly grandmas in the village and what already had it, because you find that once the information travels from online to offline, tracking it and correcting it offline, especially to communities who don't have access to the internet, it becomes very hard. With people who have access to the internet, you can have a conversation and take content down and stuff like that. But once content moves to offline communities, it has its own life, and you cannot take it down. And that becomes very hard and might endanger people's lives.
Wow, thank you so much for that perspective, Nelson. That's like really important. Like it's sort of like connecting like the chain of communication such that, you know, we feed from the internet source and then we give to people in the grassroots that may not even have access to internet. Now, to get the message across to those people, it takes like a lot of process, right? And then now for us to now start demystifying like all those things that, oh, what you actually heard is not true. It's like another process, more like we have to like repeat the cycle again. And oftentimes you can't even guarantee that, you know, you'll be able to clear out the doubts in people's mind. And then, you know, when you were talking about drinking tea without coffee and without sugar, it was just so interesting because we had something similar. I don't know if it's the same, you know, in other African countries, right? Because in Nigeria, we had almost the same thing, how that people were saying, you know, when they use sanitizer. So in some states in Nigeria, they were actually drinking in the sanitizers instead of, you know, using it on like to clean their hands. So I'm like, oh my God, like something as basic as that. So it's just so interesting how that this information, the way we see it like so easily, for some other people is not that easy. And that's why we have to be careful in what we get to feed into the system. So now, Hlengiwe, I want to go to you and I want to play the devil's advocate sort of in this whole conversation. I want to ask, right, misinformation, we always sometimes put the blame on the government. The government is not doing a lot, the government can be better, blah, 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 and all of those. But then I want to ask you, don't you think that the citizens have like a huge role, if not a bigger role to play, especially with the internet penetration, right? Don't you think like they have a role to play in the spread of misinformation? And are you sure misinformation is not just a form of laziness? Like it's just because the reason why misinformation spread, do you think it's because of people being lazy? So I want to get your perspective. What do you think, in especially like from the South Africa context? And I'm particularly interested in South Africa because, you know, with the recent xenophobic attack we had last year, there were a lot of misinformation. We saw people bringing out things that didn't even exist just to escalate, you know, the attack. So I want to know your perspective. What's the cause of misinformation? Is it just a governmental thing, or the individuals have a role to play? You know, tell me.
Okay, so yeah, interesting question. Indeed, as members of the public, we do have a responsibility in as much as we enjoy our right to freedom of expression. It comes with responsibilities. It's not an absolute right. So indeed, I would agree with you that we have part of the blame that can be apportioned to us as members of the public in spreading disinformation, in spreading misinformation. If I can just draw your attention to that family WhatsApp group that you have, I'm sure in that WhatsApp group you have that sister, that brother, that aunt, that uncle who will just, you know, forward as received, and the next person would also forward as received, and with no attempt to verify the information. And like Nelson was saying, before you even know it, the information has spread to all corners of the country, and even those societies or areas that are offline. So we have a duty as members of the public to verify the information that we receive before we forward it. But again, to flip it back to the government, I would say that in as much as we have a responsibility to verify information before we forward it, before we distribute the information, there is a big responsibility on the government to ensure that there is a proactive disclosure of the correct information, of the credible information. That is a very powerful tool to counter all the false information that might be distributed. If government is vigilant with information, credible information, the misinformation or the false information that might be out there can be easily countered. I'll give an example of the situation that is pertaining here in South Africa, that I'll speak specifically to the COVID-19 situation that we are in right now. The South African government has made available a platform online where you can log on, you can access COVID-related information at no cost. And there's been also an attempt to provide some of that information in languages that are other than English. Because if you only make it available in English, you are also excluding a segment of the population that might not understand English. So, so that's a good example of how to proactively disclose credible information. And this COVID-19 pandemic, or the situation that we are in, it's a call to action for the government to ensure that information is provided timelessly and also is the correct information, because the moment we get wrong information, like people drinking tea to cure COVID-19, things could go terribly wrong, and there could be things that are worse than that. And you can actually have more people dying because of relying on wrong information that has been distributed. So my point is that in as much as the public has a responsibility to check or verify information, the government itself is the chief provider of credible information at this point, and it has to be proactive in that role. That's one issue that I would like to point out. The other issue is that as far as COVID-19 is concerned, we are faced with a situation where there is proliferation of misinformation or disinformation, but it's happening at a time when media literacy is very low. So to even for the members of the public to understand, to have that idea, or to, the levels of media literacy, we were at a stage where, at formative stages as far as media literacy is concerned, and then all of a sudden we have COVID-19. We expect people to be media literate. We expect people to know what to do. When you say people should verify information, verify it with who, where?
Yeah. Great. So sorry to cut in, Hlengiwe. That was really like, you just hit the nail on the, on the wall with that point about media literacy, because it's something that the government has not invested in, like in the before now, and then all of a sudden, COVID-19, you want people to start responding to it. And then, like, for me being like someone in the policy field, like one of the things we're trying to push for here in Nigeria is even like journalists themselves, because journalists themselves have to actually have media literacy, because most of them do not. That's why fake news and misinformation gets to spread faster. If you've employed any cross-regional or international partnership with various actors in dealing with misinformation, or is it something that I know you're sort of like in the international relation space in your country. So are you working with other partners across the globe to tackle misinformation, or is this supposed to be a thing where a country fixes by itself?
I lost some points of your speech because your internet for me down. But if I
okay, I can take it again.
Yeah, please.
I was asking, right, that have you employed like any cross?
No, I don't remember Olalere, but her job is doing this webinar, so I'm just listening in.
Oh, okay. Was she
Oh,
where?
I have no idea.
So you in the webinar, I don't know where she were.
Okay, I think like one of the hosts is not muted. So sorry.
Yeah,
so,
please can you repeat for me?
Okay, so I was asking if you've employed any cross-regional or international partnership with other actors in dealing with misinformation. Like, how have you been able to tackle it within Brazil? And I know you're in the international relation space within your country. So have you had anything to do with other people in other countries to tackle misinformation, or you've just been fighting misinformation, by itself?
So about the international environment, I'm being in touch with some partners from a lot of institutions around the world, but just discussing the strategy to provide a good information for our people in each country that we represent. So we do not discuss a global strategy in general, because the outbreak happens in different ways in each country, you know, and the strategy to fight the misinformation in each country need to be different. We try to get the experience out of Brazil, in my case, but we need to rebuild this strategy to put closer than our reality. So, because in Brazil, I want to talking about Brazil, because the Brazilian environment is hard. Because, for example, Bolsonaro's president, Bolsonaro is the president nowadays, and his presidency spreads a lot of fake news to our population, and we have to be clear to us the semiotic stuffs behind this, because Bolsonaro's got a great machine to spread fake news to our population, using through the WhatsApp, through the social medias, especially Facebook, for example, and fight against fake news and fight against government fake news is hard, because people do not have, like I said, tools to identify what is fake news, what is not fake news, what is true. And when the president and him machine of spread of fake news are working day by day to this, to the misinformation, to make the denial of the science, to denial of the data, the official data, to denial the OMG, to denial everything like a great conspiracy, this narrative reach deeply our people that only use, like I said, WhatsApp or Facebook. That is a strategy. The misinformation is not isolated phenomenon. It's a strategy behind a government that wants to justify the toughen measures, promoting in parallel the social disturbing about coronavirus. That is the Brazilian environment. Let me exemplify this. When you are a president of a country like Bolsonaro, you are like a supermassive body, you know, and all the stuff in the country tends to spin around you. When you make a speech of violence like Bolsonaro made, or denying the science, this reach deeply our people, because Bolsonaro covered this fake news with legality, no? Because there is the president. See, he is the president, and if the president said, he covered this for our people that do not have tools to analyze this with legality, no? And the speech of violence will turn practical violence. The denial of the science gonna be the acting of the people do not respecting the quarantine and the lockdown and stuff like that. No, that's the environment in Brazil, and that's crazy. And is coordinating globally.
Yeah. Wow.
For the
Thank you so
right.
much, Rogério. Thank you so much, Rogério. More like, you know, with the office of the president, you sort of have like a lot of power, and anything that you get to say can sort of endorse certain information. So I think that's like a very important point. Nelson, I know you're working a lot with the DefyHateNow, and like so many people in the call would want to, like, you know, start up a similar initiative like yours, or, you know, do things to, you know, help to stop the spread of misinformation across the country. So I want to know, like, I want you to share with us, what do you do to engage the government and different people in the work that you're doing? And then at the same time, it's sort of like a two-edged question. You know, in as much as we want to stop the spread of misinformation across our country, you know, we can't, I don't think we can ever get to the point where we totally stop, you know, the spread of misinformation, we can sort of like reduce the spread and then maybe like, improve our response to tackling or dropping misinformation. But I want to know, what's the balance? So some, like, for example, in Nigeria, right, we used to have, we have hate speech, and then the government decided that they wanted to create this bill called the Protection for Internet Falsehood and Manipulation and Other Related Matters Bill, sort of like a social media bill that can help to protect people against hate speech and misinformation. And then in that case, a lot of citizens felt like, oh, why are you protecting, why are you making this bill, or this bill is going to affect our freedom of expression. So what is the balance between government trying to introduce laws, you get it, like government trying to introduce laws to protect hate speech, and citizens themselves feeling like when those laws are introduced, it sort of like restrict their freedom of expression? And how are you trying to balance this in the work you're doing? I don't know if you get me. It's like so much question in one, but see.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Great.
So I think two key points. Number one is like on collaboration with government. The second one is like on how the balance between kind of restrictive measures to prevent misinformation and freedom of expression and stuff like that. On the first bit of like, so the work of DefyHateNow spans over 5 countries, and I work as a director of program. So I get to see a lot of these things. And let me say like 60% of my work is actually talking to people. This could be government. Just earlier today, I had a call with Facebook because they're one of the biggest platforms, especially in the continent. So we try to talk with these stakeholders, the people who own the platforms. We try to talk with governments. Let me talk about governments. I think like, especially for our governments here in Africa, people usually try to talk about the issue of misinformation, separate from the issue of kind of freedom of expression and access to information. I think majority of the time what will happen is that like whenever governments restrict access to information, that allows room for speculation and creates a pseudo kind of information sources that exist to cover that vacuum. And that's a very big problem. So for us to tackle the issue of misinformation, we need to ensure that governments uphold the right to access information. Governments avail information to people. But like when you have governments that are being slow with sharing information, or at times are being deceptive to their own population, what that does is that it creates a lot of mistrust and it creates an atmosphere of suspicion. So my work with governments, like I'm working with, we do advise to the government of South Sudan and other governments. Usually I tell them, hey, please improve your online presence, improve the way of sharing information, ensure that you have public information officers who are informed, and also do not crush dissent. Allow room for dissent so that people do not resort to other avenues. If people have questions, if people have such things. Governments globally are very bad at digital information. In some countries in Africa, more so than other countries. And so like there is a lot of work that we need to do in order to digitize and to ensure that like there is more response to these issues. The second aspect of like creating the balance between freedom of expression and kind of laws. The problem is usually like, so the laws, even like here, for example, we see even countries that have very good laws, but when you see that the implementation of those laws, once you come there, they don't have structures. That's a big problem. You have laws that are good, that sound, and that spell human rights in a way, and even access to information. But like once you come to the implementation framework, you have institutions that are draconian. Some institutions are even colonial institutions that have not been reformed. Like for example, the institution of the police, at times, like a lot of the police, there is no reforms and there is no stuff like that. So that you find that once these laws are handed, I mean, in Kenya here, we have a very popular joke that he was caught by the police and he was like, hey, I know the Constitution, I know my rights. And the police just burst into laughter because they're like, what is Constitution? One policeman told an activist that ini karatasi, this is just a paper. So we need to work on that. And then on the laws, I think definitely like a lot of countries are making progress on that. civil society need to come into the room. Nigeria, I think you know about Paradigm Initiative. I'm in contact with Benga on these issues. The more we have civil society engagement in the process, and we have public participation in the process of making these laws, the lesser it is for them to become draconian and be misused in that. And we also have issues there. We have at times like parliaments are not open. Participatory methodologies in shaping decisions and laws are not there. But also we find from the civil society and the activist community, at times people do not make the effort to engage. So we need to have more of that. So let's have good laws. Let's reform the institutions that implement them. And as civil society, let's engage in the process of making those laws.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Nelson, for that. That's very important. And then, like, I love the fact that you were able to bring in like the colonial element into the picture, because like it's almost the same thing here in Nigeria as well. A lot of citizens even feel like most of the new laws they want to implement are just like copy and pasted from like maybe like a Singapore, one of all these developed countries. So even right now, we face the same thing. And you know, like being someone in the policy field, I know there is always a gap in implementation. Like you make fantastic law, fine laws, do all the public hearing and all of that. But when it comes to implementation, it's like something that keeps dragging. So just to wrap up this session, I just want to get and then take on the questions from the audience, and then we'll have people, you know, directly give us their questions. I want to hear from you, Hlengiwe. How do you engage the government to the work that you do, and you know, basically, and do you get to involve people like external actors, like people from other countries as well, to the work you're doing?
Thank you very much for that question. When I was speaking previously, I was about to mention an initiative here in South Africa, which is spearheaded by Media Monitoring Africa. So they started. It's called Real 411. I think William can put the link on the chat. So that people can access it. So it's an initiative which was started by Media Monitoring Africa during the elections time, the 29 elections, to spread, to curb misinformation and disinformation during the time of elections. And right now, during this COVID-19 crisis, it has come in handy. And the good thing is that the government has come on board, and it has endorsed this initiative by Media Monitoring Africa. So that is very important to at least highlight the willingness of the government to partner with civil society organizations, because when you're looking at misinformation, you need all cards on deck. You need different stakeholders to participate, and it's even more powerful when you have the endorsement by the government to participate and also be supportive of such an initiative. So I think that is very important to highlight. And then in other countries as well, there are other fact-checking initiatives that are happening. I know in Zimbabwe there is a fact check. Although the capacity is limited, but it's also an initiative that is taking place there to tackle this misinformation scourge that we are currently facing. And there are different initiatives also that are happening in other countries as well. But the thing is, it's kind of a firefighting kind of initiative, because you already have a forceful, deadly pandemic, and at the same time you are trying to educate people and bring in these measures. But really, it's worth trying. So, but what I want to highlight is that there is the importance of continuous media literacy that we need to do as civil society. It's some of these activities that have started in different parts of the continent, media literacy, digital literacy, because not everybody has the ability to tell that what they are reading or what they are forwarding is misinformation, that it might mislead people. So there has to be continuous engagement and continuous education on these programs. Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Hlengiwe. The point about, having continuous education, it's not just going to be like a one-off thing where, oh yeah, we educate people and then that's it. It's more like we have to, continuously educate people. Thank you so much for that, Hlengiwe. Okay, so now I'm going to be taking questions from the audience, right? We have compiled a number of questions. So I would ask, I can throw it, I'll just throw it open. So any of you, Hlengiwe, Nelson, Rogério, you can just, decide if you want to answer the question. Yeah. So the first question is that people have touched upon the global nature of disinformation and misinformation. This person is asking that what is the role of hate groups and racism in spreading misinformation and disinformation, both online and offline? Do you want me to take it again, or did anybody get it? You're muted, Rogério. You're all muted.
Can you repeat the last part of the question?
Okay. The person is saying that, I'm just taking it all over. People have touched upon the global nature of disinformation and misinformation. So what is the role of hate group and racism in spreading misinformation and disinformation, both online and offline?
Yeah, I think
just
I can.
Just give like one point, the other person 1 point, so that we can define.
Yeah, I think when it comes to hate group and misinformation, most of the time, like there's something called othering. That means looking at people as like not, especially dismissing people who don't look like you. And then most of the time we find also hate groups and racism and these things. The very premise of racism is built on a false premise that the skin color of one person does guarantees you superiority on a front row seat in terms of intellectual heritage and all this capacity. So you find the ideas that fuel racism, the ideas that fuel most of these hate ideologies, usually are based on a flawed and kind of inaccurate information. And this also continues whenever you have misinformation, you have a situation of fear and you have a situation of mistrust. People listen to their own, and I think a lot of people know about echo chambers. That means like you sit in your own place and you only listen to information that conform to your own ideology. And I think most of the time we find that this misinformation continues to generate more hate and put people apart. And then as people are divided, they tend to be more hateful. So the two are interlinked. That's why in DefyHateNow, we usually focus on hate speech, but we also focus on misinformation, because more often you find that there is a direct link between the two.
So, so if I can comment this, because it's an interesting question, because there is a research that Science magazine that was released 2 years ago about the hate speech, about the ideological lines of policy now, and in average, this research told to us conservatives groups and far right groups around the world tend to share fake news and hate speech through the internet more than the liberals, for example. So it can this research identify who mostly spread fake news and hate speech and racism speech through the internet, and the conservatives and far rights are the champions in this scenario. That's just one point that I want put to plus with the speech of Nelson.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Rogério, for that. So I just move on to the next question. This is related to policy. I want Hlengiwe to, say something about this. How do you think the policies and laws on misinformation from the global north are viewed in the global south? So like Brazil, Kenya, and South Africa. So how do you think the policies and laws of misinformation from the global north are viewed in the global south? Then Rogério, you may want to chip in on this if you have something.
Yeah, this point is interesting because there is the far right. I'm gonna start the analysis from the political, separating the political ideology. For example, Steve Bannon, one of the guys from Cambridge Analytica scandal, for example, is one of the coordinators of the misinformation globally to the far right governments, like Viktor Orban in Hungary, and Trump in US, and Bolsonaro in Brazil. So there is a coordination of the misinformation about, for example, coronavirus outbreak. You can see the pattern. Trump, for a long time, make a great denial, public denial of coronavirus, about coronavirus and about the measures that the scientists asked to do. Bolsonaro made the same, and Viktor Orban the same, and this denial have killed people. No, because the presidents of the great countries like US, like Brazil, for example, that have more than 2,000 million people, for example, 200 million people, 200 million people. This speech reach a lot. The people do not have tools to analyze what is true or is false, and people avoid to take measures to protect their own selves in this outbreak. So what my point? The misinformation is a strategy of the far right for a lot of goals. One of these goals is to promote social disturbing and fear about something. To, like I said, take toughen measure to put order in the scenario, and the price is taking rights from the people step by step.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Rogério. And because we have thank you so much, audience, for joining in. We're having a lot of questions. Thanks for the engagement on the chat. You guys are you rock. Thank you so much. So moving on, I would just when I give out a question, only one person will be able to respond because we're having a lot of questions and we don't have so much of time. So I take one question and then one person responds and then we'll move to the next. That's how we'll roll. So the second question is, what is the role of international aid? I think Hlengiwe, you may want to answer this. What is the role of international aid and donor communities in mitigating the spread of misinformation? Did you get that, Hlengiwe?
Yes, I did.
So if you could just answer in 1 minute.
That question.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for the question. I think in my previous response, I mentioned a multi-stakeholder approach in tackling misinformation and disinformation. So even the international donor community, I see a role that they can play. When we're looking at the civil society that is working on tackling misinformation and disinformation, like the initiative that I've alluded to earlier, the one by Media Monitoring Africa, In order to sustain such initiative, you need support from the donor community as well. So just to give an example, I noticed that Open Society's foundations has availed funding to respond to COVID-19 issues in Africa. So those are some of the projects that can come on board when you're looking at this COVID-19 pandemic. Such funding can go into fact-checking, such funding can go into educating the public. So there is indeed a role by the donors to support the civil society.
Okay, Hlengiwe, just to build up on that question, you know, most of the time, this organization, these donors are always big in assessing like the outcomes and then the impact. But in the case of misinformation, how are they able to measure the impact even if they fund such projects? I don't know if you get it.
Sorry,
like
can you repeat the last part?
How do they measure the impact of whatever funds they give for misinformation? How do you measure? So for example, imagine you're funding, like, you get it? Do you get it now?
Yes, I can respond to that. It's like I've said, it's a continuous process. It doesn't have the immediate tangible benefits where you can say these are the inputs to the projects and these are the outputs. It's a continuous process which depends on people understanding of the initiative as well, and something like that. So it will in the long term be realized as people get to understand and the concept of misinformation, but it might not be immediately visible, the results.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so now we're just gonna open up and then allow like the audience to ask questions. So you can just use like the raise hand function in your Zoom, and then would invite you in so that you can ask questions. Thank you so much. You guys rock, our audience. Thank you for keeping the conversation going via the chat. So let's have the first question. Just a minute. Okay, we don't have anybody. Okay, so Sharon Mitchell has a question. Do you want to, rate me?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. One, I just want to thank you for having this panel. We work on the same thing with disinformation in the United States. And so I just wanted to say that out loud because we've been doing this for the Black community, particularly for elections. And I just want to, and so it's for us, it's challenging just from an American standpoint, but to watch some of this overlap to other Black communities is really, across the diaspora, is so disheartening from the concept that somehow we're all still victimized by the same tactics. And the two things I just wanted to ask quick questions about, from the standpoint of when that disinformation makes it to places that does not have internet, what are the strategies that are being used, or what are things in your community that's being used? Because I feel like when what Roger said was, when our president said something about the virus wasn't that big of a deal, that went across the globe. And people, I know that I heard that some people died based on some of the things he recommended. So what are the strategies to get to the people who don't have internet but seemingly have access to TV?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michelle. Nelson, Rogério, Hlengiwe, who want to step in and answer?
Yeah, when you're looking at communities that have no access to internet, the strategy would be to use, and other civil society organizations are already using that, community engagement initiatives, where you go into the communities and engage the communities and conduct awareness programs on these, and also introduce issues around media literacy, because even though the communities are not connected to internet, they still use things like community radio stations, they still use community media, they still rely on community media. So it's also important to engage the radio stations to also fact check information, disseminate credible information.
Great, thank you. Rogério, you want to say something? Could you unmute so we can hear you?
So in Brazil, the main problem is not like I said, the access to internet. Obviously, we got far regions in Brazil that not have access internet, even when you're talking about the Middle East in Brazil and the north of Brazil, like Amazonas states. But like our colleague from South Africa said, we have radio stations that reach these people, and some groups from public bodies like FUNAI, like Human Rights Ministry, that reach these people. And there is another point. Our community receive a lot of information and are united in this. Even when you receive a bad information, you can spread to the community. So our strategy, I guess, have been focused into spread the right information, because people that not have access to internet gonna be rich for this, because our community deal well with this. No, that's my point. Analyzing the Brazilian reality.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Rogério, for that. That was a very interesting one. And then just to add into what Hlengiwe and Rogério said, like in Nigeria, yeah, because like where I work, we sort of do political communication and all of that. So right now, like most of our strategy in terms of dealing with misinformation, we're going back to the roots. So like not just radio or even television, right? We're going back to using town criers. So literally like having someone go on the street and eating up that thing to tell people that, oh, this is the right information. So right now, trust me, like in Nigeria, we're trying to even go back to the very, 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 very root of communication, just to ensure that people actually get the right information. Okay, so we have another, since there's no hand raised at the moment, if you have a question, since we're taking in questions, you can just raise your hand, use the function on your Zoom, so that we can have, so sorry, someone's hand is raised. Okay, so let's have him. Can you unmute so we can hear you? We have a question.
Me? Hi.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much for the panel. Very, very interesting. I'd like to know from the speakers whether you think the social media platforms may play a key role in, and what do you think they should do to tackle disinformation and misinformation? And coming back to what Nelson was saying about echo chambers, whether do you think that maybe limiting targeting and profiling, especially based on race, for example, or religion or socioeconomic background, may be a way to limit the adverse impact that disinformation may have, and also hate speech? Thank you.
Okay, can we just quickly, Nelson, while you answer that, just a minute, can we take Chima Obi's question as well, so that we can just respond?
Okay, thank you very much. This is a bit on the side, perhaps, but not so different from the previous asker. I'm wondering, what are the celebrities doing in your countries? I see that in North America, some celebrities and many African-American business leaders too are sort of galvanizing support and either helping with information spreading campaigns in social media or in their local communities. And they're also supporting local relief efforts, such as food banks or response funds. So I'm very interested in, like my sister Shona there, like, is Timaya doing anything? Is Burna Boy front and center talking about what to do? And I would love to hear that from my Brazilian brother Rogério, my sister Hlengiwe and Nelson too, are celebrities and business leaders in your countries rallying at this time because they have more power than the governments. I would actually say they have a lot more power and they reach a lot more people. People are following Burna Boy. They're not necessarily following Buhari, right? Just as an example.
I know, right? Thank you so much, Chimaobi. Okay, so Nelson, let's take the first question. And then when you answer that one, you can just answer Chimaobi's question. I want to hear from Hlengiwe and Rogério as well. Yeah. So Nelson?
I think, let me speak about social media companies and what they are. And I want to speak very strongly on this. Social media platforms and the spread of misinformation and at times controversial content, when we talk about that issue, it's a problem of design, not a problem of implementation of policies. There is an inherent design flaw that makes social media companies more susceptible to misinformation. And that is problem, and that's an issue that, I mean, few social media companies want to address because it links directly to their revenue model. The content, the algorithm, the way that content comes to you, it's kind of links towards creating an echo chamber, but it also links towards creating content that is more controversial. And we see this with misinformation. Like information that is controversial is shared more and stuff like that. And then there is something which is called platform liability, which is like really interesting, and that's the legal framework for that. As we're talking right now, most of these platforms do not consider themselves to be a news or a media agency. They don't. They view themselves as a medium, the same way you have the electricity company or the phone company. They are not responsible for the content. I mean, you can't take them to court for the content. And that makes them, I'm not saying that there should be discussion on that, but that makes them the incentives for them to kind of clean up the platforms and make it more inclined towards accurate information and towards tackling misinformation very low. So there is work to be done on that. I'm seeing Facebook is saying that they're giving some grants. Google has launched Google News grants and stuff like that, but that is just a drop in the ocean. And this is something that we need to take up in conversation and a discourse beyond this. They're doing something, but they're not doing enough. Let me just end by this. When you go to Facebook, Facebook has community standards on how to report content and what, but when you go to the Facebook homepage, if you're logged into a Facebook account, you would not see that anywhere. You have to be like, you have to dig around and go to settings and what to see the community standards. That should be the first thing that comes on your face. Yeah, just I want to end with that.
Okay, Rogério, what are the celebrities, the influencers who have this huge social currency? What are they doing in Brazil about misinformation?
Yeah, that's a good question about the celebrities, because it's the same problem that I talked about. I told about the president. A celebrity are super massive of information, of followers and all the stuff that I said. So Brazil nowadays are divided by half. So I can say half part of the celebrities supports the president and spread his message. That's helps to mess a lot the scenario, even to our people. That's one point. The other half of celebrities, are engaging in some action supporting initiatives with funds, giving publicity, making propaganda, and handle with this seriously. But we are facing in Brazil these two realities. We have to take this like the beginning point. Brazil nowadays is divided between the people who support the president and celebrities, politicians, companies, businessmen, and the other part that do not support the president and have to face all all these guys in their battlefields, like celebrities in social medias and traditional medias, etc., etc.
Great. Thank you so much, Rogério. And then just to add in, Chima will be like being like a Nigerian. So in like, we've been working, like my company has been doing a few work for the United Nations agency in Nigeria to sort of help like spread information about the coronavirus. And then in that, in the campaign we did, and it's still ongoing, we engaged celebrities like Kwaje, Pretoria, survivors of coronavirus. So a number of international, it was not a state government thing, but it was more like an international organization was able to fund, this celebrities in order to put up information. But then there is like a bit of a trick, like just building from what Rogério said, it's a bit tricky when you use, we have to be aware, just to flag this, it's a bit tricky when you use influencers, celebrities to push out your message, because whenever you use them, it means that you're sort of like endorsing them as ambassadors and as role model. So for example, in Nigeria, there was a case whereby a particular celebrity, right? She put up information, the NCDC, which is like the Center for Disease Control. They used her in like promoting information about social distancing. Only like after 1 or 2 weeks, she was holding a party in her house. And then everybody's like, oh my God, you are the Center for Disease Control. This person is supposed to be like some form of your ambassador. How come she's going against the role of social distancing? So sometimes when using celebrities, it's sort of, how sure are you able, like how can you guarantee that they would adhere to all the practices in this time? So there is that risk, but still in Nigeria so far, we've been using celebrities to push the message. So we'll just take another question. Let's see, it was there. Carolina has a question, so you can just speak so we can.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So thank you so much for such a wonderful webinar. I'm from Brazil originally, and I was curious how the aid system helps or hurts a lot of this, especially because a lot of times the aid system give funding to bureaucratic organizations in the US, for instance, right? That then come back to our countries to develop a certain project or not. And I also think of the World Bank role on this, right? I know the World Bank has been trying to develop, for example, the website on coronavirus information for Mozambique, right? But again, they have not been able to doing local languages yet. So I was just curious about the role of aid in all of this.
Okay, Hlengiwe, do you want to say something about this? The role of aid? Yeah. You're muted, we can hear you.
I'm saying I didn't get the last part of the question.
Carolina, do you want to take it again?
No, it was just an example of an aid project, a financial aid project around, for example, World Bank developing the coronavirus website for Mozambique, but not doing it in local languages. So I was just curious about how financial aid plays a role on helping or hurting some of your activities.
Did you get that, Hlengiwe? Okay, Rogério, I think you want to answer.
I didn't get the whole question.
Okay, I'll come back to you, Hlengiwe. Let's have Rogério
My
answer the question.
connection is very poor. I can't.
Okay, let's have Rogério while you fix your connection. Rogério, do you want to come in?
Yeah, did you hear me?
Yeah.
Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Okay. So about the aid or the civil society or funds, private funds to provide aid to initiative. So in Brazil, I read about this, but some enterprise, like for example, Ambev is a huge enterprise that the factory produce beers and soda and stuff like that, and they stop the factory to, for example, start the production of masks to donate to the hospitals and communities. That's one point. They do not financial another initiative. They stop their only factoring process to start a new one to try provide aid to hospitals. That's one point. There is some funds and some funds that were created by crowdfunding to try to help initiatives in favelas, in Brazilian favelas. For example, Adinka Fund is a funding coordinated by Vitor Del Rey and Priscilla Cadets in Brazil that want to provide funds, small funds, a little type of loan to people in favela that have initiative to help in this crisis, and entrepreneurs that need to keep their own business. So that's the initiative that I know. But there is the government initiative. For example, under the pressure of Congress and Justice Power, the federal government has released some lines of credit to save the small business and middle business, and other line of credits to put liquidity on marketing through the banks, but the banks do not push down the interest, and for the people it's not interesting. Yeah, this.
Great.
And there is a fund in the National Bank of Development to put liquidity in the small business to keep the salary of the employers and to keep the functions of the enterprise between the outbreak. That's the line that I know.
Oh, okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. You know, it's been like such an insightful discussion. We have to wrap up now. Thank you, Nelson. Thank you, Hlengiwe, and thank you, Rogério. But then before then, I just want to turn it over to Neosha from the Global Black Youth, you know, to take it up from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shona. Thank you very much, everybody, and all the participants for joining us in this very important conversations. We especially like to thank the Portland's Institute as our main partner, but other partners as well who have been very supportive throughout all of this work, including the Internet Without Borders, Open Think Tank Network, the Youth Cafe, the Pan-African Council, the Global Business School Network, Web Roots Democracy, Civil Tech Innovation Network, African Diaspora Youth Forum in Europe, and the University of Pretoria and the ACP Young Professionals Network. So thank you all very much, and I'll leave it to Nieleti to wrap up for us. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I echo the thanks. This was a fantastic panel. It was our inaugural GBY webinar series. We will have 2 more, the next one on health and scientific innovations, and the third one on entrepreneurship and mitigating the economic impacts of COVID-19. So we invite you all to also take part in those conversations. Thank you all to the people who wrote in the chat. As us millennials say, it was lit, and we wish that we could have spoken to more of the questions and comments that were coming up, but you are now part of the Global Black Youth family. You're part of this movement, so thank you for jumping on board. Lastly, to our fantastic panel members, it's not often that we get to hear from you, so thank you so much for taking the time, for talking to us about your work, for talking about how asset rich we are as a community. And lastly, to Shona, it is her birthday, ladies and gentlemen, and she decided to spend it with us. So happy birthday, and thank you so much. So thank you so much for joining. And
happy birthday!
Thursday. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.